Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company coming to you from our flagship store in New York City. Today, we have a hero of mine because all of our guests are my heroes. They're willing to talk about collecting, which is intensely personal. But not every hero origin story, Marvel Comics, is exactly the same. Today, Reggie tells us his. Reggie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim.
Now, like I said, not all origin stories are the same. Some people get started very early. They know almost from birth that they're into watches. Others start a little bit later. Tell me about when you first realized that you were into watches.
Man, fairly recently, I would say 4 years ago, but prior to that, you know, everybody has a recollection of being handed a watch from a grandfather or whatever. I've never really had that experience. I had a calculator watch, a Casio calculator watch for my birthday. And I loved it because, you know, I mean, it's a complicated watch, you know, in the 80s. And I wore it to death and I lost it. And I never wore a watch until, you know, turning 25 in the mid 2000s, I decided I wanted to buy a watch with my own money, right? So I went down the rabbit hole of checking specs or checking what people would recommend. And I ended up buying something, a Citizen.
Do you still have that watch today?
I still do. I still have the watch. It's very worn. I think this is called a Nighthawk.
Highly technical.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's so much so I don't even know how to use it. When I got the watch, I thought I would use all the different features, and then I looked at the instruction manual. I'm like, this is really daunting. So I just wore it for the timekeeping. You know, I didn't use any of the pushers. I didn't know how to use most of the features. But as you can see, it's really worn.
No, but I can relate to that because I think we buy our watches for aesthetics. You know, it's part of our personal expression. We like the look. It's part of who we want to project as a person. And I think, you know, you work in tech. You wanted a very technical watch even then.
Right.
So from that first Citizen, you started moving, I guess, into watches that were maybe a little bit more conventional. And I think I've actually got one of your secondary editions. Tell me, what was going on in your mind when you bought this Burberry? Because you went from Citizen to Burberry, but the aesthetic change could not be more different, night and day.
Right, so I was more conscious of wearing watches as an accessory to my outfit. I want to be grown up and more serious. So I didn't do any research on this. I just saw something that I liked. I forgot where I got it, what big box retailer I purchased it at. But I love the aesthetic of it. It looked to be very functional, very
a little bit more
useful.
Classical than the Citizen.
Right, exactly. It originally came with a black strap, so all black. I figured black is a universal color you could wear with anything. That replaced that watch because it looked a little bit more grown up, and that was my go-to watch for a while. I didn't know how to use it either. I didn't know what a turning bezel was. I didn't know any of the terminology.
That it was a GMT was kind of like secondary to the fact that you just loved the way it looked.
Right.
The image it projected, a very different sort of image than, I guess, your daily life, because you're in tech, you're in technology.
Right.
Was there any sort of sense that you wanted to turn back the clock a little bit? Because this does have some classical elements to it.
Right. I did. And again, I wanted something more classical. And I remember going into a retailer, I was buying some sunglasses, and the guy was impressed with it. I didn't even know what really I had on my wrist. He's like, wow, this is a GMT watch. I'm like, I know what GMT means, but I don't even know how to use it. And he educated me on multiple time zones. And I fell in love with the watch even more, knowing that there's a timing bezel on there that I didn't know how to use until then. So I had a salesperson selling me on something I already owned, and it made me fall in love with the watch even more.
Now, I know that feeling because, you know, I knew watches prior to my time in the Navy, but I thought the Navitimer looked cool. I had no idea how to use that bezel until someone who was a pilot showed me how to use it.
Right.
And it changed my perception. Now, at some point, you made a step, I guess, from the world of quartz to the world of mechanical. And what led you to that point? Because that is a big step for any collector.
So, in earnest, one of the reasons why I started collecting mechanical watches is, it's for the romanticization of mechanical movements and just the significance of something that's evergreen, right? I mean, I'm in tech. Cell phones, they have a year shelf life, and then you're forced to upgrade, and after a couple of years, you can't even upgrade anymore. You got to get a new phone, and that kind of got annoying. And so I started to just love the idea of owning a mechanical watch. You could potentially actually keep that forever, so long as you service it and maintain it. And I remember going into a jeweler not too far from where I live, because I bought my wife a pair of diamond-studded earrings, and she somehow damaged the screw back. And so I thought, let me just bring it to the jeweler and he'll fix it. And as I'm waiting for him to fix it, he said, why don't you come over here to this Mont Blanc section? I had no idea Mont Blanc made watches. And I almost bought a watch. I forgot which model it was, but I'm never like an impulse buyer. I have to research to the nth degree what I'm buying. So I shook hands with him. I told him I'll be back. Got my earrings, paid him for whatever the labor cost was. And I went researching, are Mont Blanc watches any good? I remember that's what I typed in. And then I'm like, oh, that's great. A lot of them are, and I was interested in a Nicholas Rieussec chronograph watch. I ended up not buying it because my attention was shifted somewhere else. So before I even bought my first piece, I spent like months, maybe even a year, just researching and looking at different timepieces before I pulled the trigger on one.
And that was my experience too as a collector. The first place I went was online because you can only see so many watches in one place. You can only find so many people you trust to give you advice. But you go online and you've got the world at your fingertips. And I guess my next question is, where did the world lead you?
Oh man, it led me to YouTubers and organizations like Watchbox and you, looking at the reviews, the unbiased nature of just breaking down the components of a watch, which leads a consumer to make an informed decision, not based on hype or based on anything, not relevant to the buyer. That was really
being able to find the intrinsic qualities of the watch.
Exactly. There were other people too, Andrew Morgan being one of them, and even Teddy Baldassar, who focuses on smaller brands or brands that people overlook, and you do that as well. So that was those were the three people that I feel like I consumed a lot of material from.
I know exactly what you mean. You take your experience in the watch world is sort of the sum of many different resources.
Right.
So now the watches on the table, they sort of run the gamut. I don't really think you probably talk about your collecting sequentially so much as the different styles. What is it you love about the gray side? Because I feel like this is almost the median watch here. You've got Omega alongside Chopard, Louis Ulysse, and Gerard Perregaux. And then on the other hand, you've got a lot of upstart micro brands. So tell me a bit, what do you love about the gray side? Because this is a personal favorite of mine too.
I wanted a definitive chronograph, and I was very close to buying a moon watch, a traditional moon watch. But then I wore it, thought it was great. It was manual wind. At the time, I didn't want a manual wind movement, but I thought that's what the world wants me to get. You want to buy a chronograph, you have to get a moon watch. But I mean, look at my collection, it's kind of off the beaten path. So I rejected that idea. And I'm like, if I'm gonna get a chronograph that's significant, not just to me, but significant overall, I wanted to get something that was kind of different. And platinum dial.
Yes. Not just in color, but in fact.
But in fact, right. You still got the lyre style lugs on there, but it's ceramic. And the fact that they could polish that thing the way they did, it looks like a mirror shine, yeah. Believe it or not, outside of all these great features, what sold me on it is the lume. The lume is fantastic on that watch.
True, the crown, the bezel, I mean, the whole thing. It to me, I loved the dark side, but this feels more like the idea completed. Yeah. It's like they went one step further and they created a more compelling watch. And I agree with you, white gold hands indices, a platinum dial, and a ceramic case. I mean, it's a monstrous piece. And you did wind up getting a Speedmaster, but you got it on your terms.
Correct, yep.
So now, continuing through the collection, there is an interesting kind of sub-theme here. You get watches from fascinating micro brands whose founders are very personally identified with the models. So the Brew, for example, I believe you've actually had a chance encounter with the founder and found him very compelling, and that's sort of part of what led you to the watch.
Right, we bumped into each other a few times. I'm a member of Red Bar in New York City, and that's why I first met him. Didn't know who he was at the time, but he was so friendly. I thought he was just one of the founding members of the group. But then I found out that he's a watchmaker, and I discovered Brew watches. And when you meet someone that cool, that nice, it's like you want to support. but not just in a pandering kind of way. I kind of want to support because I genuinely like their watches.
Yeah, not just like a pat on the back, but like a vote of confidence. I'll buy your product because I like who you are.
Exactly. I was going to get the Brew Metric, the traditional iconic brew, but I'm like, you know what? Again, I like the way that gold-plated and the gold dial, that whole look.
Very
I love
70s
that.
feel to it. And I do notice that with some of the watches you've got, they do have a little bit of a vintage flair to them. I mean, with the Baltic right here, like right here we have like mid-70s Omega chronograph, then like here we have more like 1930s and 40s Patek 96.
Right.
How are you drawn to such disparate styles? Because this is about as classical as it gets. Leaf hands, brigade numerals, salmon dial, round case.
Right.
What animates your passion for this type of style?
Not realizing how proportionally wonderful a 36 millimeter looks on my wrist, because before that, I thought I had to do a 42 or at least a 40. And that's because I didn't really try everything, right? And I'm new to the collecting world, and I thought I have a 7.5 inch wrist, I have to wear a 42 millimeter. And then until I tried, I had a friend of mine who has a Day-Date 36. I tried it on, I'm like, well, this doesn't look like a 36. It looks like it's proportionate to my wrist. It's beautiful.
It's
watch.
got presence that belies its size.
Exactly, and so I thought, when that came out, 36 millimeter, I love the salmon dial and the brigade numerals. I was sure, silent scene, this is when the watch was unavailable for a while. Put my name down, and then I got it maybe like 6-7 months later, and I loved it ever since I donned it on my wrist.
And I think it's important that, we not treat watch collecting as this progression from, you get a Citizen and you end with Patek Philippe. You, of course, have collected Patek Philippe, but you've also stepped, I guess, laterally to companies that are a lot more identified with their creators and their creators' vision.
Right.
Baltic, Brew, even, I guess, Christopher Ward. And, I mean, my goodness, the Bel Canto. What hasn't been said about this watch? How did you discover it?
So I missed the first round of the Bel Canto, the blue, and then the green dial. I thought it was just a wonderful looking watch. And I love the fact that it has a sonnerie passage, just the chiming. You wear watches for the fun aspect of it. You're not really telling time. You can barely tell time on that because everything is just, seems to be blended into the dial. But I love the fact that it's fun to look at. It has a chiming mechanism. It's titanium. There's some finishing to it that's really nice to look at on the dial.
Certainly the dial module is very nicely executed. I mean, I look at this, I think Ulysse Nardin freewheel, but that costs tens of thousands of dollars more.
Right.
And the other thing too is that you've got a collection where Louis Ulysse Chopard coexists with Christopher Ward. and I think that proves to people that sometimes you can have more with less, more fun with less money.
I agree. I think that's the reason why I bought the watch. Not even outside of the monetary aspect, it's just a good looking watch,
And there's another school of thought which says, yes, you can get great value in smaller brands, but you can also get great value when you buy a high horology watch that's maybe not from a hype brand. And I think between the Quattro barrel setup, 216 hours of power reserve, and a GMT, tell me a little bit about your Ulysse Chopard, because this is an old friend of mine.
Yeah, this watch, I think, to me, is one of the most beautiful watches that I own, mainly because just the dial layout. Right? I mean, there is a symmetry to it. You have like the 4 sub-dials there with the power reserve. But I just like the detail on the dial. You have the Côte de Genève striping.
Dial side.
On the dial side, yeah. Dial side Côte de Genève, yeah. It's 9 days of power reserve. I mean, next to an automatic watch, I think it's even better because, you set the automatic watch down 24, 48 hours, you got to wind it again. But this is over a week.
I know exactly what you mean. Like, I love Mr. Roboto here, but Mr. Roboto needs a pick-me-up. I have to wind this watch daily every day.
Right.
And it's an automatic watch,
Right.
There's your 38 hours of power reserve. This, people forget it's called the Quattro because it has 2 sets of stacked barrels. There's 4 barrels in this thing, and yet it's as slender as a stack of dimes. And a really beautiful movement, too, that pulls no punches. Like, I think in terms of finish, you're getting as good as Audemars Piguet, maybe a bit better.
I think so, yeah. I mean, we got the beveling is to mirror shine. You can just, stare at that thing for hours. It's beautiful to look at. And you have a GMT function.
You've got everything you need, and surprisingly, it is loomed, which you might not expect on a dress watch, and there's great dial depth.
Oh yeah, love the applique Arabic numerals that are polished. You don't even need lume for that. When you flick your wrist, the right lighting conditions, you could see the Arabic numerals there. They're resplendent.
The shine and the twinkle.
Yeah.
Now, it is a steel watch, which is a little bit different for a dress watch. I noticed that's a common theme. A lot of your watches are steel, titanium, or ceramic. Do you shy away from rose gold, and is maybe this the counterpoint to that?
I love precious metal. I couldn't pass these up because I thought that they were, they fit my, aesthetic and things I like in terms of dial side. But this, I love precious metal. Rose gold, this Parmigiani Tana Hemisphere is one of my favorites. Not just because of the way it looks, because it's dual time.
And it's a true dual time.
True dual time. You could set the secondary time zone to the minute. You have AM, PM indicators for both the home time and the reference time. You have a date. It's a large watch, 42 millimeter, but it doesn't seem too crowded. The dial seems to be well laid out.
And those lovely teardrop lugs. It's not just an aesthetic with Parmigiani. There is a functional purpose. It's a close-fitting watch. For something developed in the 2000s when bigger was better and biggest was best, this is a rare case when a big watch is made to kind of wear small.
Yeah, should I take it off?
Please, yeah. Let me take a look. We'll talk a bit about Parmigiani, because I think we spoke about the micro brands, but you do have Patek, Gerard Perregaux, Louis Chopard, Parmigiani. And these are a wonderful juxtaposition because it proves you can be a watch collector with absolutely no prejudice or dogmas. You can move laterally, you can move up and down in price. And I guess the question then is sort of, as you've become a more experienced collector, it still seems you lead with aesthetics. Like, you don't let people talk you into buying a watch for the movement. It has to look right.
Yep, absolutely. That's the number one thing I look for. Of course, you want to learn more about whatever piece that you're buying as far as the mechanical function of it, whether or not it's something that you should invest in. I don't want to use the word invest because...
Is it worth your time?
Is it worth your time, right?
Yeah.
Outside of that, if it doesn't check the aesthetic box and that you really like it, then it's not worth buying.
And this is a rare case during one of these discussions where I'm going to talk directly to our audience out there. Guys, we need to let go. 95% of the reason we buy our watches is because we like the way they look. Right. Stop lying to yourself. This is not a utilitarian purchase. If you don't lead with your heart, the head will not follow.
Absolutely.
Reggie's absolutely right. We have to buy watches at any price point that we think look cool.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're a telecommunications guy, a tech guy, you like the technical look, but maybe it's the analog technical look that really gets you, because I can see the commonality between that First Citizen and this IWC GST Perpetual Calendar Chrono is that they have a very technical set of analog gauges on them.
This watch, it's chock full of features. It's a perpetual calendar chronograph with a aventurine moon phase.
Yes.
Which is beautiful. And you have the integrated bracelet aspect of it, where, that's another thing that attracted me to that watch, the fact that you could just take that apart.
Every single link can be removed.
Can be removed without a tool. They give you these two pusher tools that you could press the dimples on the back, which I think is wonderful because some watches, I have a watch that I own, you could see the underside so scratched up, from removing, because I change, even though a lot of watches here are on bracelets, but I have their corresponding straps. I have tons of straps that I swap out. But this is a wonderful piece.
And a very intense watch. The black dial and the steel case, first of all, they only made this reference for 4 years. They're not easy to find. But I think between salmon dials and black dials, really hard to track down.
Yeah.
This here would probably be the most difficult watch among all of these to actually go out and find again. And it's water resistant, it's anti-magnetic. So you do like complications and you do like complexity, and I think nothing epitomizes that more than the WWTC. How'd you discover this beauty?
I was just doing some research and I wanted to get the most bang for buck but complicated watch. And I thought, world timer, chronograph, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And I love, actually, you know what? Outside of the dial layout, what I like about this watch is it's very legible. I've owned another world timer where I had to squint to kind of look at the different time zones. This, the black and the white contrast, it really helps with the legibility. Even at low light, you could read every single text on that dial. And the other thing I like about that watch, which is not, instantly apparent, is the strap. You got it's a rubber underside, but it's leather, so it gives it like the top side is leather.
So it lasts like rubber, but it's got the refinement of leather.
Right. So it looks very dressy, but it's very sporty because you could swim with it with the rubber underside of that watch. It's really I love that watch. I've traveled with it several times. That's my go-to travel watch.
Let's talk a little bit about building memories around watches. Now, a lot of these watches, you bought them because you liked the aesthetics, and I have to admit that's exactly why I buy my watches. But there have been some times when maybe other memories and occasions and landmarks in life have attached themselves to these watches. Could you tell me about some, maybe we were talking about your son getting into watches here, and I think this is a great point of entry with Brew, but you've bonded over this watch.
Right. So he would, laugh when I'm binging on YouTube videos about watches, and he sees a transition or the transformation of me just, watching regular stuff to just almost exclusively watching watch-related content. I mean, I do watch scripted TV, right? But he laughs at me, and then over time he started to watch content with me. And I remember one day early this year, he went to a Sweet 16 and he asked to borrow one of my watches. I told him he could borrow any watch he wants, and he picked that watch. So I had to size it for him, and
I noticed it was a little bit tight for you.
It was. So I didn't put the link back on, but he enjoys wearing this watch. Whenever he's going out and he's hanging out with his friends, that's the watch he goes for.
Now, you mentioned that you travel with some of these watches. Could you tell me some of the places that you've been with either the Parmigiani or with the Girard-Perregaux? Because I think it's always interesting to talk about the story after the purchase, because the journey continues. People forget that.
Right, that's true.
That's why we buy the watch.
So it's funny you picked those two, because I brought those watches and I wore them in tandem. I went to Scotland last fall. It was it's a Red Bar event. So it was like a global meetup. I met a lot of wonderful people. I met watchmakers. It was a really fun time. So I brought those two watches to the Red Bar event, and I building memories based on that. I was
Scotland,
yeah, Edinburgh.
Was the Scotch good at least?
Oh, it was. I bought some stuff, brought it back home, and enjoyed it. I slow sipped it. I didn't want to. I bought this exclusive Balvenie just for that region, and it took me like a while to drink that because I wanted to savor it and kind of relive the moment of being in Edinburgh. So that was fun.
And say, notice all you guys out there, I didn't say watches and whiskey. I know it would have offended someone if we're talking about Scotland. Yeah. So I mean that's a great story to have those memories built around the watch, and also, frankly, to build memories around watch people. It was the watch that came with you, but then all the people you met.
Right.
And we talked about how you can move in any direction. You've got your Parmigiani and Girard-Perregaux. They're high-end independents. They're revered. They're very cool. No one doubts them. But a lot of people probably don't think that, progression from that type of watch also includes the likes of Oris and Ming. So I guess tell me a little bit about this, because you've got your two dive watches on the table, and they're both from smaller brands that are a bit off the beaten path.
Right. I mean, not wanting to just stick to monochromatic themes, I wanted a pop of color. That's mainly why I bought this watch. It's a great looking watch. That green really is a beautiful shade of green.
It's a green that'll go the distance. Like, I think that this will hold up.
Absolutely. And you have the bracelet, which is polished. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And a quick release. We were talking about how you do like straps.
Right.
This probably makes it easier to strap swap than any other watch on the table.
Absolutely. And with all the watches that I have, actually when I wear this watch, I guess the uninitiated gravitate towards that more than any of my other watches because of the green. Not that you're looking to like, wave your wrist around and say, hey, look at me, but when
you want to look sharp. There's
right, you
nothing
want to
wrong
look
with
sharp.
that.
But for some reason, every time I wear this watch, people gravitate and they ask, what kind of watch is that? And I tell them Oris. They're like, oh, okay, I don't know what that is. And some of them don't know what Oris is. But it's one of my favorite pieces because of the color, because of the dial. I'm constantly looking at my wrist because the green is just such a beautiful shade of green.
I mean, that's a great way of looking at it. First of all, it's very dynamic, it's very attractive, but also it's fascinating to me that among non-watch people, this is the one that stands out.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to me what a non-watch person will notice on a watch person's watch. And for me, it's usually when I'm wearing something crazy like a Devon tread. Like, of course, people are going to notice. You can see it from down the block. It's interesting to me that a green dial is what pulled people in.
Yeah, the color, I mean, that's very attractive and it draws people in.
And with Ming, H41, first dive watch from Ming, smaller brand, very heavily identified with one man. How'd you discover the brand and how'd you settle on this model?
I can't pinpoint exactly how I discovered it. It could be YouTube, but I'm sure it's someone from the Red Bar group. There's a particular gentleman that has a few Ming pieces, and I think I've probably got the idea to look at that watch from him. But outside of just the way it looks like a futuristic watch. It looks like something from the movie Tron.
Yeah,
right?
It doesn't register as a dive watch immediately. I mean, it almost reads like, we're on a starship. This doesn't look like the markings of a dive vessel. A very cool watch from a really cool guy, and I guess the nice thing is there are other gray sides of the moon out there. You probably will never see two of these in the same place, except maybe at Red Bar, maybe.
Right, maybe at the Red Bar you'll probably find another Ming.
So now let's talk about reliable sources. We spoke about how you watch videos by Teddy, Andrew Morgan. You've seen our 1916 features. What are the other ways people can find information? Because I think, yes, the thrill is in the chase. That's a big part of the fun. And also, you want to make sure that you're getting good advice. So where do you go?
Definitely recommend research through YouTube, because it's good to watch a 5-10 minute video on a watch that maybe you might not have access to. Maybe the watch is unavailable at your local AD because it's kind of rare. So watching a YouTube video is important. But of course, reading about the timepiece you're looking at, researching that way online, through
Forums, maybe?
forums,
Magazines?
absolutely forums, joining a watch group. I'm a member of Red Bar.
And now to talk a little bit about that, because a lot of times when I ask people, like, how do you get your information, it's almost all online. You've had quite a few brushes with brands like Ming and others through Red Bar Brew. Right. Talk to me a little bit about the value of actually going to these in-person events, because I don't think we talk about that enough.
Right, I mean, that's a great point. So I've met CEOs of brands, representatives of those brands, and they kind of describe, and they have the watches available, you could try them on. It's great to be a member of a watch group where you could talk to people who will know more than you and kind of can steer you in the right direction. And what's important is to stay away from the hype, because hype doesn't really bring you any satisfaction. It's just, it's hype based on someone else's liking of the watch, or the
or
majority.
An algorithmic feed of social media posts tailored toward, that's nonsense.
Exactly, right. So at the end of the day, you're going to end up wearing a watch and you're going to enjoy it for its intrinsic value, not for what the watch community or whomever decides or determines is the piece to get. But speaking to people and being a part of a community and researching online, it's the best way to discover things that you might not discover otherwise.
And I think it's really cool that you talk about the people and the experience, because I've always found as a dealer that the best way to add meaning to a purchase is to take it from a purchase to an experience. If you buy a watch, you look at it, you smile, you put it in the safe, it will never mean anything to you except what you paid for it. Once you start building memories of people and events around a watch, I find that moves it towards like keeper status.
Oh yeah.
Are there any never sell watches on this table?
I think most of them are. For sure, the Chopard and the Girard-Perregaux, for sure.
Forever watches.
Yeah, for sure. And the Parmigiani too. It's a precious metal watch. I love wearing it. The bracelet that bracelet is so supple. Just wearing it feels like a very comfortable piece of jewelry.
Hermes strap, beautiful stuff.
I mean, it's one of the best straps I've ever worn. So it's really comfortable to wear. So definitely that.
Now, in terms of like the wisdom of an experienced collector now, I know a lot of people out there wonder, like, do you have like an in and out rule, like watches in, watches out? How do you decide that it's time to sell, trade, or move on?
I kind of do have an in and out rule. There's no number that I've come up with as of now, but it's really about wrist time. If I have a watch that I haven't worn, because I put them on rotation, I try to wear my watches. I don't have any safe queens. But if I don't wear a watch for an extended period of time and I'm not gravitating to it, I don't feel like wearing it, that's gonna probably be sold or try to move it somewhere.
Do you have a Grail watch? Is there something that you consider to be the absolute zenith of ambition?
Man, Grail watch. I think a Debatoon. I like the brand.
We got pictures of them all over the walls, yeah.
You know, Debatoon is definitely, I'm not even familiar with the references, but I do know the Stradivarius, is that what it's called?
The Stradivarius.
Stradivarius,
and it's called the Stradivarius because it's inspired by the Stradivarius.
Right, exactly. That one is very beautiful. And Journe. There's so many different beautiful Journe options. The Resonance watch is beautiful. There are other models that I really, really like, but I guess you could consider those Grails.
I think easily consider those Grails.
You can.
And then, the thrill is in the chase. There's the joy of discovery, like finding out how deep the rabbit hole goes, like things that were made in the past. So, okay, like I say, the wisdom of ages, you started at 25, you always had a little bit of a penchant for watches. If you could give advice to collectors who are just beginning, maybe even if you were speaking to yourself as a younger collector, what advice would you give in retrospect?
Exercise patience. Patience in buying and especially patience in selling, because we could be impulsive on either side of the spectrum, where the chase is beautiful. It's wonderful to get the watch and unbox it and wear it, and then not giving yourself enough time to really have a honeymoon phase with the watch. And then because of, especially now, you have social media, there's so much thrown at you. We could be speaking about something right now, you check your phone, and that very thing you're talking about is automatic, like all of a sudden it appears on Instagram. It's like
I post 3 watches a day on Instagram.
Right. So you're gonna be influenced by external forces. So enjoy the watch that you have. If it doesn't get wrist time, then I guess that's a good reason to part ways with it. But be mindful of the very real aspect of regret. That
seller's remorse.
Seller's remorse. Yep. I was just influenced by, you need to get something else. You need to get a different brand, and I'm wiser now. I don't really care about brands as far as how our society wants you to.
There's not
focus.
A right brand and a wrong brand.
Right, exactly. It's the right watch or wrong watch for you, not necessarily the brand du jour or whatever it is, right? The brand of the day.
So we go back to the classical tenets of philosophy, know thyself.
Know thyself. That's a key tenet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.